Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show will revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Moosie Drier and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier, and today we are thrilled to welcome two guests, one, the executive producer, as well as the director of the wonderful documentary, The World According to Allee Willis. Please help us welcome Prudence Fenton and Alexis Spraic. Prudence and Alexis, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Well, I have a lot to cover, but let me start by saying that I watched the documentary, The World According to Allee Willis. Just fantastic. I learned so much that I didn't know. She was responsible for some of the biggest songs in music history, some of my all-time favorites, actually. But I'd rather let one or both of you give an overview. So before we begin and really get started, can you tell us a little bit about Allee, who she was with regard to her professional career?
I mean, she's best known. She wrote Boogie Wonderland. She wrote September, two major hits for Earth, Wind, and Fire, among other songs. She wrote the Friends theme song. She wrote the music for The Color Purple, the musical. I was really struck when I started this project because she really has been so much of the soundtrack of my life without me even realizing that it was her behind it. And I think a lot of people seeing the film have that experience too. But she sold over 60 million records and has won Grammys and Tonys and Emmys, and just an incredible person.
Well, and Prudence, you were in a relationship with Allee for many years. So I was just curious, like, how did you first meet her to begin with?
I met her through Paul Rubens. I met Paul. I was living in San Francisco. I came down to LA. I went to a party with Paul. He said, we're going to meet Allee and Russ, some other friend of his. And that's how I met her. And and I think she thought I was a big business person. So she arranged a business trip up to San Francisco to meet me. And anyway, from then on, it was both. It was business and personal.
So just the first time you met, you guys really hit it off, both of you?
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me in this documentary was her daily routines filmed constantly to keep a record of. So how did people react to that? And, how did you feel, Prudence, like when you first saw that and, that she was constantly filming?
I mean, it seems like it was constant. It was mostly for work. And when we were doing it for work, it was either a tape recorder going or it was a camera going. And I thought that was important because often we would go back and review what the meeting was and what they said. I mean, when I think about it, especially when we were doing Willisville meetings and we met with SoftBank and Intel and even Qualcomm, and we would hear the executives say, there will never be selling anything on the internet. There will never be advertising on the internet. Like, that's so classic. But also it was a great way of reviewing ideas, and it was just good record keeping. So I didn't think of it too much as I'm in a movie or I'm being documented. I thought it was a very useful tool, actually.
Did other people mind it or at all, or no?
No, they didn't seem to mind it. I mean, I think they forgot about it after about a minute.
He was kind of doing it at an interesting time because I feel like now the proliferation of social media, people are very self-conscious and have an idea of like where images of them will end up or could potentially end up. But when you go back and you're making documentaries and you get to work with archive, before social media, people don't have that same sense of awareness of or even their own ability to make sure, that's why we have all these great photos that the only photo you have of someone is sort of out of focus, one of their eyes is shut, that kind of classic thing. It was something, there were people we interviewed, like Michael Patrick King makes a funny joke where he's like, it wasn't like a person answered the door, a camera did when you came over for dinner. And then you'd be sitting there and kind of wondering at some point, like, does anyone really want to watch me eat chicken? Like, is this, but I do think there was something really wonderful about the fact that there are still these stories to be told in this world where people being filmed didn't have that same awareness that they do now.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, so I just love documentaries. And I have to admit, when I went to watch this, I thought, you know what I'm going to do? Okay, I'll watch the first 15 or 20 minutes and then I'll come back and finish it whenever. I never got up until the last credit of the ending credits. I never stood back up. Couldn't, it was so well made. And it's not an obligatory thing that I'm saying. It was so well made and so fascinating. And for me personally, for one, the San Fernando Valley is where I grew up. Also, there's Pamela Adlon. Her and I have been friends for, about 3 decades now. But forget all that. What it's 2024, there's 1% or less than 1% of music producers are women. That's criminal there. And then there's her father. And can I just start with the producer thing? Like, what was your approach to, is it something that you were hell bent on exposing, or did it just come out?
I was very surprised by it. I mean, I think part of it was just, with Allee, what we were looking at to some degree, because there is a storyline or a thread in the film about, you think when you hear someone's written these hit songs, September is the fifth most successful pop song in music history, like, you assume that they're extremely wealthy. And it wasn't like Allee wasn't, she was doing okay, but she wasn't David Foster in the house in Malibu. And I started to ask questions when I was doing interviews. I have a music background more as a fan, and you do actually see a lot of women credited as producers now on music, but they're performing producers. It's Beyonce getting a producing credit on her own work. It's women out who are performing. So I think that distorted my understanding of what was really going on. And so I was very struck by the fact that when we started to get, one of the amazing things in Allee's archive is that she has every sort of like, whether an idea for a song started out on a napkin, but, and then it ends up being like, Neutron Dance or whatever, we have every piece of archive. And so we'd have her humming and then the demo and then this and that. And so what you saw was that she was an excellent music producer. She would produce the demo for Neutron Dance is really, really, really solid. And somebody took a producing credit for producing that song and used her arrangement. I mean, it's the sound that she created. So when I started confronting that was like, okay, a wait a minute moment. And then fortunately we interviewed people like Andre Alexander, who just won a Grammy for the We Are album with John Batiste, producing that, and Stephen Bray, who was one of her co-writers on the musical The Color Purple. And they were able to kind of talk about it more from an insider perspective. I think Andre says it's less than 1%. It's actually less than 3%. I mean, that's splitting hairs. It's like a criminally you're correct. That's how it's presented in the film. But it's a criminally low number, and that really is what keeps women from having that. When you hear about like a Rick Rubin, or now I guess like Jack Antonoff, or those people have ownership of the sound, or Steve Albini. I mean, the fact that that's a door that's really shut to women is terrible. And it's especially when you look at Allee, who was actually doing incredible things producing music. We have the Pet Shop Boys talking about their collaboration on What Have We Done to Deserve This, and how she came in more almost as an engineer with these compressed drum sounds that became very, Prince made those huge as well. And she knew how to do the tech part of that. And they literally say she enabled us to make a sound that sounds like nothing we've ever done. That's what a producer does. So that was something I really wanted to highlight. And then what was interesting with Allee, because she tended in her public space to it was always a very positive persona that she was putting on. And I was really struck in the speech she made when she was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame that she actually called out the industry for this specific issue. And she did it in a really artful and endearing way. But it was a moment where I was like, this was definitely really important to Allee. And this is like a thread we need to track through the film, because in the last years of her life, when she was standing up in front of her peers and being honored, that's what she took that moment to address. And now, I know there's an organization that's going to be, I don't know if I'm officially allowed to say, but there's an organization called We Are Moving the Needle. That's a lot of industry heavyweights that's trying to make sure that women are better represented in the music industry right now, a nonprofit that I think might be honoring Allee. And, I'm glad there's getting some sunlight on this conversation, because I think people, we see women being successful in music as performers. We don't necessarily think about what's happening behind the scenes.
Of course. And the fact that you said, well, she's not David Foster in Malibu, without us needing to explain who David Foster is. There you have it. but we're
Yeah, and I
you
mean,
know,
he is obviously extremely talented. It's not a
of
knock
course.
against him, but he launched his career with the exact Ali and David were both major writers, contributors to the Earth, Wind and Fire I Am album that launched David Foster's producing career. Ali wrote more songs than him. I mean, you
Yeah.
just can't get a more cut and dry example of how things worked.
Right. Her relationship with her father is heartbreaking. You know, what he told her when she was going to go to California or start in the business, she lived the majority of her life not being able to be who she really is. How big of a struggle is this for her?
Yeah, because her family didn't figure so much in everyday life. I mean, it would only come up if there was, you know, a family occasion to go to, or
Mm-hmm.
or or if there was a visit. I mean, when her brother came to visit, I saw them. They just didn't want to see what was happening. With her father, there wasn't even a question of me meeting him, because he was so judgmental and kind of hard on her. And you know, I mean, he never liked her individuality. He wanted her to be, you know, married to a doctor. And that was just never going to happen. So I think you give up after, you know, after a few decades, you just give up. I mean, yes, she would have wanted to be accepted, but it wasn't even worth fighting for at that point.
Yeah. I remember
I mean,
that quote. Her father didn't like her individualism in the documentary. Yeah. And that's just unfortunate. So,
I mean, the irony was that he was like a very flamboyant, and we don't get into this in the film, but I think it's really interesting. You know, we found out in the process, and maybe Prudence already knew this, but working on the documentary, you know, he was kind of this flamboyant dresser, and a more like, I think he kind of wore like that, like Bill Cosby style sweater and whatnot, but that's not like every guy in Detroit, you know, like colorful. And he had aspirations when he was young to go into the arts, and he followed in the family business instead. And I think there was some jealousy and resentment there.
yeah. If
That
anyone's going to be an individualist, it's
Sure.
going to be me, kind of.
yeah,
Yeah.
and exactly. He had this big, larger than life personality, and was always the life of the party when
Mm,
it was, you know, people outside the family. But that can be, and I think this happens to a lot of people who have parents like that. Like, it's a bit gaslighting, because you kind of
mhm.
go home and you get a different version than the rest of the world sees,
Sure.
and you wonder what's wrong with you, you
Well,
know, instead of putting the onus where it belongs.
Mhm.
well, on that same note, Prudence, you know, I was watching this and I couldn't help but be taken with the fact that you seem to be, for a lot of it, like an open secret, like kind of, you know, that people knew, but she didn't want to say anything. Like, did that affect your relationship at all?
I don't know. I must be an idiot because I just rolled off my back. I just didn't care. I mean, I don't care what other people
Yeah.
think or how they perceive. And it was, it just, I don't know. I mean, I look back on it and I wasn't like heartbroken or fighting or upset. I just accepted it and kept walking. It just didn't seem that important.
Well,
But
something you said a moment ago, sorry, Jonathan, real quick, but something you said a moment ago with, well, that this stuff only, these issues really surfaced when her family was mentioned or involved, makes me a little bit happier, because, like, you know, other people she wasn't blood related to was her family.
But I don't know. I don't want to speculate about anyone's sexuality here, but how often do I think about being straight? Never.
Right.
Thank you.
You know, and I think with Allie, when you look at the waters that she was swimming in, I mean, one thing that I was struck by in her early albums, when you look at Earth, Wind and Fire, Patti LaBelle,
Mhm.
she's not Allee Willis. She's a Willis. She didn't want people to even know she was a woman. It didn't help her get hired for the next thing. So when you're coming up in that system, you know, it's just, I think generationally, it's like an interesting conversation, because I think if you're a teenager now and you're thinking about your sexuality and defining it, you're just in a very different landscape, or presenting
Yep.
yourself as a woman in the arts. You're in a very different, you know, swimming in different waters. So I think that, unfortunately, was just something that was like another hurdle, another thing to just let roll off your back and move forward, because
Right.
what else can you do? It was so coming from every different side you could think of.
Sure.
So, Prudence, you never lived in Allie's house?
No, I learned early on, she wanted it as a museum. So it was going to be all her stuff and everything. I think I'm a reader and there wasn't a comfortable chair to sit down and read a book in. So I would also say, just sort of on that level, she was completely accepted by my family. My nieces and nephews adored her, and they're all sort of our age. So maybe that softened it somewhat.
Writing songs for Patti LaBelle and Earth, Wind and Fire and all this like soulful funk music. How did that come about in her? Does she have a certain gravitation towards a certain type of music? It doesn't seem like she did, because she wrote the Friends theme song, and
well, she could do anything, but
she
her
could do
affinity
anything.
was for music. I mean, she grew up in Detroit. She grew up as not just Motown, but Stax. I mean, a lot of really interesting Black music was emerging in a way that was more available for a white audience. I mean, it was always there, it just in terms of how you could hear it. But what I think is really interesting about her, and because it was something I thought a lot about going into the film in terms of how we were going to approach it. It wasn't like, there are artists there's cultural appropriation in music. There's artists like Elvis that sang Black music. It didn't acknowledge, Black musicians for that, or artists. Allie was discovered over and over again by women and people of color. They brought her in, they heard her sound. So it was so organic, and as much as she loved Motown and went and sat on the lawn as a kid, to kind of escape her family life and listen to the music and learn from them, she didn't set foot inside Motown until she was like in her 60s. And she, again, was invited there by Berry Gordy, I think, and they threw her a birthday party and were honoring her contributions to Black music. But Allie really, I mean, she was very ahead of her time in terms of like the conversations that I feel like became more mainstream with Black Lives Matter. Allie already had very much, again, in her Songwriters Hall of Fame speech, she acknowledges that she got to play a part and be a part of Black music and the legacy of Black music in America. That was how she saw it. And so I think that was part of why she was always, it was always so collaborative, and she fit into that world. It wasn't sort of this like white artist taking the sound, not acknowledging, where it came from or why, and limiting themselves to a white audience. Allie was just sort of always kind of hip, and like, again, Patti LaBelle, Verdine White, Maxine Nightingale. I mean, there's so many artists that were like, oh, I like what you're doing, and just didn't care what she looked like or who she was. And I think that speaks to when you're part of a marginalized group, I think you have an easier ability to look past identity and see talent. So they were better at spotting her.
It's how it should be. Best idea wins. Who cares about anything else? The package that it comes in, it's best idea wins. Remind me, was it the Music Hall of Fame or somewhere where she got up and said something along the lines of the irony, like if her dad only knew that she wrote the music for Color Purple? That was like a touchdown moment for me. I was just like,
it was like the last thing she said to him. It's a joke that she made that she said it to him and he was gone within an hour, so that was,
my goodness,
but
right.
you got the gist. Yeah.
That's right.
I think, I think that was a moment, exactly, a touchdown moment, a moment where she was like, she chose her authenticity over pleasing other people. And I think that story is very emblematic of that.
I do want to ask about a couple of the songs in general, specifically, actually. Let's start with Neutron Dance, which you touched upon already. You cannot even think about Beverly Hills Cop without that song. I mean, they put it now in the XLF, they put it again there too. How did she become involved in that? And she did not get everything entitled to her from that, right?
Well, I think it says it pretty clearly in the movie. He sent the Neutron Dance song out to all these writers in LA to get a song that sounded like or was as powerful as that song. And she realized all these people were ripping her off. And so she then wrote Stir It Up. And then, later on, he never found a song to replace Neutron Dance, and actually found Stir It Up in the garbage can, gave it to Patti LaBelle. And, and that's how it happened.
And he being Jerry Bruckheimer.
Yeah.
That little guy. But Yeah, I mean, I think in that case, and that was something that, I mean, this is still done all the time, and they're called sound alikes, right? They were like, oh, if we license this from the Pointer Sisters, it's going to be really expensive. We'll get some artists to copy it. And then 2 weeks before the movie's coming out, they are like, oh, we don't have anything. We're going to have to pay for this. Allie was actually a good publisher when she did that song. So I think, the song that she more notoriously really, I think, got screwed on was the Friends theme song.
Well, we'll touch upon that. I did want to ask also about What Have I Done to Deserve This, which you just mentioned. I absolutely love that song. Always have. Just such a great song with Dusty Springfield as well. How did she hook up with the Pet Shop Boys?
Well, she was sent over to do their portrait. And she was painting them, and they said, what do you really do? And she said, I'm a songwriter. And they went, a songwriter? And then they realized that they should collaborate on a song. They worked that out, but she was over there painting their portraits. It was not even there for music at all. And then ended up writing that song. And I think they all agreed that Dusty Springfield should sing it. And they waited a year to record it. And yeah, it's one of my favorite songs.
Great song.
Right. So, the theme song from Friends was just mentioned. So arguably the most iconic TV theme song that we've ever experienced in our lifetimes, really. And I think it was Mark Cuban who said something along like that song set the tone for the show. And I believe that. I think that's true. So here's the thing. She got screwed over. How did she get screwed over? And
I mean, it's complicated in the sense that there are sort of two layers to it. One, which is that, she wrote the song as part of her publishing deal. She owed a certain number of songs for this overhead deal that she had, and nobody thought that the show was going to be successful. So there was not a lot of money, and that happens. So she got paid, $2,000 to write the song, which is pretty shocking. Wow. The way she got really screwed over is that once the song was a hit, I mean, Prudence, you can tell the story. You were there for it.
It was a 50-50 split. And then once they saw the song was going number one on the charts, the producers asked to have a piece of it because they said they gave notes. And, she wouldn't fight it. And I said, come on, this is so unfair. And she goes, no, these are big people. I want to be able to work in Hollywood again. So she didn't do anything. It was tragic. She also, while she was writing that song, she goes, I'm going to lose my reputation. This is the whitest song I've ever written.
She could do anything. There was no boundary, seemingly.
No, she connected to people. And that was like what I find so interesting with her is that she took, like, her lyrics are so deeply personal, especially as we were excavating her archives and really understanding her life story. She was ripping everything sort of from the pages of her life. And then she was so good at distilling them into something that was so universal and relatable that they became really commercially successful because people listen to music. What we know to feel seen, to have our feelings and experiences seen. And she could do that.
Yeah.
And that I feel like there's a point where, like, you can just spot an Allee Willis lyric like a mile away. It was her and it was a gift, but there's something like bigger than us.
Her signature lyric. And just to put a button on the Friends theme song, music in itself gives you an association. Like, you hear a song, it brings you back to what age you were and all that, right? Friends, it was a good show. You walking by the TV and you hear the song, you're like, oh, and you sit down because you hear Allie's song. And the fact that the producers, they didn't make enough money on Friends, so they need to just a crime. Anyway.
I'm shocked there's corruption in the record business in Hollywood.
This must be the first time.
The first time I'm hearing that. Yes. Well, I'm curious about the process. Did she write with specific artists in mind, or did she write the song and say, "Hey, well, I'll match this up later"?
I think that's the job of the publisher to match the songs. She didn't really write for specific artists. I mean, for Patti LaBelle, for example, yes, but that was because she was sort of in a feed line for Patti LaBelle songs. But she just kept writing, and she collaborated with lots of people, and if it was lucky, it went to a big band. No, and that was frustrating because she lost control then. She didn't get to produce the album or sort of
Well,
see it.
I'm watching the documentary and I forgot the name of the person who she knew who was like, we're looking for the color purple. We're looking for the music, whatever. And like, she's right there. You know, I'm like, yeah, talking to the TV, like, oh my God. And she finally gets her foot in some door and they're like,
He goes, "You're not Black.
oh, right.
And you've nenever done musical theater."
So-
Collaborating with Brenda and Steven, there was sort of magic in that room when they were together.
Mhm.
And it was a wonderful collaboration. Marcia Norman was the book writer and also collaborated with them on the book as well. Marcia Norman is sort of major in musical theater, and you couldn't have a better expert or a better mentor or a better teacher. And they really worked together to make that happen. I do think they wrote the 11 o'clock hour song. There were 2 or 3 versions of that, and they were writing right up until it actually, not previewed, even it opened on Broadway.
And I mean, the thing is, it was Broadway is its own, it's a sort of a closed system that they were outside of, and it doesn't create a lot of space for outsiders. And so it's so unique about that musical, and it really paved the way for so many hit musicals that have come since, is that you had Allee, Stephen Bray, and Brenda Russell. So you had a very diverse group of writers, and they came from very different musical backgrounds, and they brought a different sound. It wasn't just the same sound that sort of, I think, can be kind of a cliche about Broadway musicals. They opened it up and really pushed the envelope because they were outsiders. And I think between having, Stephen Bray and Brenda Russell, and then Allee being, they were just much more, we show it in the film, but when they're looking for sounds, they went in, Allee collects all of these kitschy and quirky old kitchen tools and things, and sound makers. She's always making them herself or buying primitive sound kind of shakers and things on eBay and whatever. And so they just started with a totally different approach than you can imagine, and I don't think Broadway has ever been the same since then. Not only do they tell more stories that are important stories for people of color, but it was like, I think, the first gay love story to be depicted on Broadway. And it also, now the music and the musical limitations that you think of when you go see a musical aren't quite so, it's not like all Sondheim or whatever. It's
in the 2005 version, though, when it went to Broadway, they brought an arranger on called Jonathan Tunick. No offense at all, but he made it very Broadway sounding the way you would expect it. And it really wasn't until it was revived 10 years later with John Douglas production that you really heard the music that they made and that they wanted and that they arranged. It wasn't Broadway-fied, if you know what I mean, which it was.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a second. You mentioned the house before. The house is fascinating. It's a character in itself in the documentary. Can you give me a little bit of history about the house and, what's so special about it now?
It was built in 1937 by William Kessling, who was an architect who did, I think, 7 other houses. He worked for Green and Green. He was a bit of a drunk and he stole materials. And anyway, he built that amazing house. That house is still there today. As Allee would tell the story, it became the party house for the MGM executives. I can find no record of this. So
by design.
I don't know, but and apparently it was the one house in the middle of a citrus grove, and I guess the executives felt safe to party there with all the starlets, and so she sort of picked up the tradition of making it the party house, and that's why she gave all those parties there. It was really unusual. You would never recognize that it was sort of this streamlined modern house, and she turned it into sort of a Palm Springs-esque house and put her Allee layer over it. At the moment, the house is sort of the headquarters of Willis Wonderland, the foundation, and the foundation is putting songwriting and music creation courses into public schools. first LA. We hired this music educator called Stephen Cox, who won a Grammy in 2022 for being a music educator. And he's designed courses to train teachers to teach songwriting in their classes. And it's taken off by fire. It's in the LA public schools, it's in Texas, it's in New York. The University of Miami has asked for it. There was just a training in Joplin, Missouri. I think by the end of the year, it'll have reached 100,000 kids because the teachers just go insane over what happens in the trainings, and then they spread it to the kids. It's fantastic. So that's kind of headquarters for that at the moment.
Besides the house, I mean, you showed some of her collection. There's an unbelievable collection of pop culture memorabilia. So it's just things that I've never seen before. So can you just like list a couple of them, you know, some things that were in the house, and do each of you have a favorite item that she had?
Well, there's a lot of Black memorabilia in there in the house, and James Brown sort of went around and with her one day and curated everything. This is offensive. This isn't. You've got to keep this. Like her mission was to sort of collect Americana for everybody, but included, you know, Black memorabilia is included in that. I think my favorite is the bull that Paul Rubens kept stealing. It's fun.
Yeah.
I love that in her bedroom there's like I guess they're like bongo drums that looks like mounted on the wall, but when you open it, it's like a full service bar. That so it's like it's just this like very well designed piece that she collected. But she had, I mean, when we were going through the archives for the film, my producer Nick Coles at one point was like, this looks like a Keith Haring, and then you know, looks it up and it's like Keith Haring, I guess for a good friend, did the wedding invitations. And so we called Prudence. We're like, maybe you want to put this snot in this.
That is now, it's now framed and hanging in my bedroom.
Yeah.
Right.
So there was always something to just, or you would just look up a book, like you'd be like, this is an interesting book. Like, oh, I have a friend, you might want this, you know, and then you'd be like, oh, this is, she probably picked it up at a thrift shop, but now it's like out of print. And it was the first edition of whatever about Black artists in Los Angeles. And it's, you know, worth $1,200 or whatever. Amazing. So, but she'd put that next to, you know, something that was not worthless, but she just had such an eye for like the design of something really mundane, like, you know, that like, I guess when you used to go to like a auto dealer in the 50s or 60s, they'd give you like a plastic branded case that you could put your matchbox in because everyone smoked, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like these fun little things that now you like, if you were with a kid, you'd have to explain to them what it was even for, because it's so many layers of things we don't use, you know?
Well, there's the monetary value of things that most of us, you know, think about. And to her, it was just the value of what it meant to her. Is, you know, the matchbox thing from the car, whatever, was right up there with.
Oh yeah, and it was really fun.
Else.
Like she liked if it was like a little damaged or had signs of use. It's like she was writing stories about the previous owner. Like she thought she wasn't like, oh, the toy pristine in the box that's never been touched. It was more interesting to her if it was, you know, somehow brought in this journey that it had to getting to her house. Right. And I think that's actually part of why I was really struck the first time I went there. Obviously it's just striking. It's stunning. It's beautifully curated. The collection's amazing. But what I was struck by is I went there for the first time not long after she'd passed away, and Prudence was still very much, you know, grieving the loss of Allee. And when you walk into someone's house who's passed away, it's sad. It's melancholy. You feel, and Allee's house is not like that. It felt immediately joyous. She felt really present. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how she did that, what kind of magic, but it's a really unique experience to go into a space like that, where she left the part of it she wanted you to feel and experience. And you don't have that kind of sense of like, oh, the material life of someone after they've passed and the burden or weight of that. Although I'm not the one who has to deal with all the storage units, so Prudence might have.
Well, but you know, she had so much to say in her home that's probably why you felt like there's no time to think this is melancholy. You're seeing everything she had to say. So you mentioned going through the footage. How many hours? I mean, was it just immense? Was it quite a task? And
10 to 20,000 hours.
You mentioned in the documentary, as soon as you told people the name Allee Willis, who you wanted to ask to do the documentary, they would say yes before you can get the words out or something like that, right? I mean, just everybody was so eager to talk about her.
So much goodwill. Yeah, it was really, that was a really fun part. I mean, we interviewed Michael Patrick King.
Hmm.
And a few days later, I got an email from Paul Feig, the director, asking if he could be in it. I had dinner with Michael. Can I be in it? I mean, it was really overwhelming because even now, as we're releasing the film, like they came out, the talent that appears in the film showed up for our premiere. They've shown up for us on social media. They really, I think if you were lucky enough to know Allie in your lifetime, she helps you put on Allie colored glasses a little bit. You're going to be impacted by it. I think people leaving the film, it's been very gratifying, have said that to us. And so that leaves a mark. And I think that leaves an impression that's sort of different than, a lot of documentaries have celebrity interviews and whatnot, but the degree to which people in the film feel like there's something that needs to be rectified, that people need to know who she is.
Well,
I think
on
is
that
unique.
on that note, how did you two meet up to begin with, and prompted you to do the documentary? How did that happen?
All roads lead back to Paul Rubens. I mean, it's so funny. I know, like, whatever 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but Paul Rubens is like, he was a great connector. He introduced us. And I'm a 4th generation Angelino, and I a collector myself, and a love of a lot of the. And I had a lot of points of connection with Allie, and so when I started to understand what the project was, I felt like it was a good fit for me, and so I really pitched myself hard to Prudence, and fortunately, she felt the same way.
It was meant to be. You did such an amazing
Oh
job.
yeah, no question.
Thank you.
She just wanted to be noticed for her work.
I think there were 2 things. One, she wanted to be recognized so that she would have an ease of doing her next project. Like people would want her, she would have the choice. It would be easy to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. She felt like Steven Spielberg could have his pick of anything, but if you actually talk to Steven Spielberg, it's never easy.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what she thought. And then I'm sure Alexis has.
Well, I think like a lot of things that when I started the project, I was looking for a more clear answer of like, what was it that inhibited Allie with expressing her sexuality in the way that you might expect someone as otherwise sort of flamboyant and outwardly confident as her. And I found by the end of it, I was like, there's not one single answer. And so I think Prudence is right. I think Allie thought it would help her financially so she could invest in her own projects. She wanted to get greenlit more easily. I think that when you're young, if you don't get that kind of affirmation from the core people in your family that you're supposed to get it from, that you do seek it from outside places. There's like an Andy Warhol quote, I think, that's like, or maybe it was just quoted in his documentary and someone else, but fame is a type of abuse. And when you even look down today at like TikTok stars, a lot of them were bullied in high school. And, Allie fortunately wasn't bullied, but I think that that idea of subjecting yourself, because it is a type of abuse to be asking people subjectively in the outside world to validate your existence and to subject yourself to that is a lot, or to take your innermost thoughts and feelings as an artist and then share them with people and ask them to embrace or love them, I think is a lot. I think there was a void she was trying to fill, and so she was trying to do it in a lot of different ways. And I think that was one thing that becomes very, I think, interesting and compelling in the film, is that when she actually found like a really authentic relationship, and there's a love story with her and Prudence, she was able to temper some of those more just self-destructive, because to live like that's exhausting. But I think that her life did become more balanced in a way that she just wasn't set up for, because her family life had never provided her really anything fulfilling.
Well,
and she was always looking for the outside world for that.
Her life on the outside was not the experience she was having on the inside.
She wanted to show something more flamboyant and more joyful than what she was really experiencing. She was always looking for happiness, really, and sometimes for her, the answer was, but I think it says a lot about her character that, like, she she connected with people from like very different walks of life, and in terms of who collaborated with an artist. And I guess I won't give it away because it's very fun, the last scene in the movie. But somebody who wants to have a connection with that person in that moment is not just like a soulless fame chasing person. That is someone who really loves connecting with people. And I think but I think sometimes her impulse to that was part of it. It was like there was this whole chapter of her life where she didn't promote herself, where she was a Willis and she was doing something else. And I think later years she was trying to make up for that and feeling like maybe if I can just do a good enough job of telling people what I can do and who I am, these doors will open or I'll get recognition for this stuff. And she was working against these huge institutional forces that don't necessarily want to see people. Like, she was so visible. How could she have made herself more visible in some ways? But
Well, one of the things, again, I agree. The documentary was fantastic. I just like, I learned so many new things. And again, I watched it in one sitting as well. So just, what do you want
I know
people to
nowadays
take?
that's like a thing. Like,
It is.
it's so
It's
crazy.
right.
I'm so old. That was the only way you used to be able to watch stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you want people to take away from this film? And what do you think Allie's legacy is?
I mean, for me, it was something Prudence said to me early on. I didn't fully grasp. She said Allie believed that everyone had a creative germ, and if they had the opportunity to nurture that they'd be better people and we'd live in a better society. And the meaning of that, even just in the last few weeks, has really changed for me. I think she understood with her story that she could touch people, like if she had someone like her to connect to when she was going through it. And she wants people to feel seen and understood and more comfortable and empowered to express their own individuality and live their lives the way they want to. And we really made the film in that. I mean, we showed her, I think, warts and all, and it's a very unvarnished look at her, but we wanted people to leave feeling that way. And I think when people come up to me after a screening or later after seeing the film and talk about how they took up a project that they've been inhibited about, or, whatever it is, that really feels like that vision was achieved.
Yeah. Listen, you nailed it. The World According to Allee Willis. And, it's a shame that she didn't get the recognition, of course, because she didn't become David Foster or mainstream. Now she's she's legend.
I see that. I think she's only going to get, even just seeing like the response that we've had to the film and the things that people post on social media and whatnot. Like, this is an evergreen film. We approached it making, it's not a series. It's a 90-minute documentary that's moves fast and is a lot of fun to watch. And I think people will be discovering her for a long time. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the film, it was out in the theaters now, and it's also out on streaming. So where can people find it?
Right now, for the rest of the week, you can still see it in Santa Monica at the Monica Lemley. If you happen to be in Southern California, we're also going to be playing a few dates at Lemley's in Southern California, I believe Glendale and North Hollywood. And we are available on paid VOD anywhere like Apple TV or Roku. Anyway, just search on it in your smart TV and it'll come up and you can rent it. And I believe we'll be on streaming next year, but don't wait and see it.
Are you going to be doing any Q&As on those local LA?
Yes.
Screen?
I'm going to be doing Prudence and I think on December. I'm sorry if I don't know the locations off the top of my head. December
4th, like Glendale.
In Glendale, okay. And then the 10th and 11th, I believe, is one is North Hollywood and one is Santa Monica. But we'll get all of them. Yeah.
People will just go find it. And yeah.
And how can people
if you
follow?
Go to the World According to AllieWillis.com or Magnolia.
That's what I was about to ask. How can people follow on social media?
Then it should be pretty easy to find exact details. But I think there's 7:30 screenings, each of them. We'd love to see you there. We'll be answering questions.
Well, listen, you guys, congratulations on making this fascinating documentary, break all kinds of legs. Really.
That's my hobby.
Yeah. Leg breaking.
Again, fantastic documentary. I want to thank you both again for joining us. Such a treat, and the film was fantastic.
Thank you so much. It was such a fun conversation.
Again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier. And again, a very special thanks to Prudence and Alexis. And please see the film and also like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast. Listening to this podcast just makes you really cool.